A dawn is breaking that you have been mistaking for one more ordinary morning arriving on schedule. The way mornings always do, whether you welcome this one or not, you have learned to measure your hope by what the night manages to steal from you before it finally lets go. The failure you keep replaying like a scene you cannot stop rewinding. The year you have already filed away under wasted, the same tired argument you have with yourself in the seconds between waking and getting up. But my word says in John 1:5, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Right now, as these words reach you, that light is rising over the exact ground you assumed had gone permanently dark, and it did not wait for your permission to begin. It never does. You have gotten so used to narrating your life by its worst chapter, and you forgot the chapter is not the whole book. The argument that ended a friendship years ago still runs on a loop. Some evenings. The prognosis a doctor delivered in a flat, careful voice. It still colors how you read every good week that follows it. The apology that never came still sits in you, like a debt you have quietly stopped expecting anyone to pay. I'm not asking you to pretend any of that away. I'm telling you this. None of it gets the final word over what happens next. Close your eyes for the length of one unhurried breath and notice something small. The room does not disappear. It only grows quieter for a moment. And quiet is not the same thing as gone. That is the first lesson. Hidden inside this dawn, whatever you have been calling finished, it has only been resting in shadow. And shadow is not the same as ending. So look at what is actually true this instant, not at what your exhaustion has convinced you is true. Something in you is already lighter than it was even a few sentences ago. That is not coincidence. That is the first gray line of morning, arriving before the sky itself is ready to admit it. I see the particular kind of tired you carry, not the tired a full night's sleep repairs, but the tired of watching the same hour repeat itself for longer than you meant to let it. The parent scrolling through old photographs after everyone else has gone quiet, looking for the version of the family that felt less complicated. The worker who has stopped updating a resume because updating it would mean admitting something. How long the searching has gone on. The one who deletes a message 3 times before finally sending something smaller and safer than what was actually true. None of this is hidden from me. I have watched every version of the sentence you almost said and did not. The mother who keeps the porch light burning long after everyone she loves has stopped needing her to. She has not been forgotten. The man who measures his worth by a promotion, one that keeps sliding one more quarter down the calendar. He has not been overlooked. There is a particular exhaustion. It comes from hoping quietly, the kind no one claps for, the kind that just keeps setting the table one more time, without being sure anyone is coming. Your prayers have gotten shorter, not because you believe less, but because you have run out of new words for the same old ache. None of that disqualifies you from what is beginning. You have been standing in what feels like an unbroken night, counting the ways it resembles every other night you have survived, certain that if a change were coming, you would have felt some sign of it by now. That certainty is not wisdom. It is only exhaustion wearing wisdom's coat. A night is something you endure. A dawn is something that arrives, whether or not you endured it gracefully. That difference matters more than it sounds, because you have spent years grading your own suffering, quietly deciding one thing: whether you are handling it well enough to deserve relief. A dawn is not graded. not on how well you survived the dark. It comes for the ones who endured beautifully and for the ones who fell apart completely. Because it was never a reward tied to your performance in the night. It was always a fact, tied to my faithfulness in it. Some of you have been waiting for permission to stop pretending you are fine, certain that admitting how dark it has actually gotten, it would somehow disqualify you from the very rescue you are asking for. The friend who says everything is fine, because the truth felt like too much to hand someone at a dinner table. The one who prays in complete sentences, out loud, and prays only in fragments alone, when no one else can correct the theology of it. I do not need the polished version of your prayer. I have already heard the fragments, and I have not once flinched at any of them. The couple who have stopped talking about the child they are still hoping for, because the hoping itself became too exhausting to say out loud. The one counting sober days on an app that only they check, terrified of what a relapse would mean, for how anyone sees them afterward. The son who has rehearsed an apology to a parent for a decade and never once said it, because saying it out loud would make the wound real in a new way. None of these vigils are wasted. Every one of them is closer to morning, closer than it feels right now. I have watched you check your phone at strange hours, not really expecting anything, just needing the small ritual of hoping one more time before you finally let yourself sleep. I have watched you sit in a parked car outside your own house longer than the drive required, gathering enough composure to walk back inside, as if the day had gone fine. None of that composure was wasted. Not on me. I saw every version of it, and I was not disappointed in a single one. I have been standing at the edge of your morning longer than you have been standing at the edge of your night, waiting for the moment you would finally look up instead of down. Much of what convinced you that darkness had the final word, it came from other dark rooms. A house where affection was rationed, like it might run out. A gathering where grace was preached from a stage but rarely practiced afterward. A friendship that taught you love has to be re-earned every single day, just to keep it. I did not build any of those rooms. I have been trying to walk you out of them, since before you knew there was a door. The dawn does not wait for the dark to end. Hold that line for a moment, because it will keep answering a question you did not know you were asking. You are not waiting for a light that will eventually arrive. Not once your circumstances finally improve enough to deserve it. The light is already moving toward the exact place you are standing, and it did not pause first to check, not to see whether you had earned the improvement that would make its arrival make sense to you. The version of me that got handed to you along the way keeps the light switch behind a locked door. It hands you the key only after you have proven yourself. Through enough good behavior, enough quiet suffering, enough years of trying harder. Only then it says, do you deserve to see again? That God checks your effort sheet before turning anything on. That God waits for the room to be clean before letting any light through the window. That God is not me. And I need you to hear that plainly, because you have been apologizing to the wrong figure in your own imagination for a long time. I do not wait for the room to be clean before I let the light in. The light is what cleans the room. That order matters more than it might seem. Not on a first reading. You have been trying to repair yourself in the dark, alone, convinced that only a fixed version of you deserves daylight. But dawn has never once waited for a tidy house. Not before it broke over one. It has broken over battlefields. It has broken over hospital corridors. It has broken over kitchens where someone was crying quietly enough that the rest of the house would not wake. Dawn does not check first. There is a related lie worth naming here, because it hides in gentler clothing. It is the idea that you must first produce something, enough gratitude, enough visible joy, enough evidence of a thankful heart. Only then, it says, have you earned the right to receive what I am describing. You have watched people demand a performance of thankfulness from the hurting, as if gratitude were the entry fee for mercy rather than one of its natural results. I am not asking you to manufacture delight you do not feel, not in order to qualify for a light that has already reached you. Gratitude tends to arrive after the dawn, warming slowly like a room the sun has been filling for a while. It does not stand guard at the door deciding who gets let in. You do not have to feel thankful yet, not for this to be true. You only have to still be here, reading this sentence. This matters especially if you have spent this season performing steadiness for people who needed you to be fine, so that they could stay fine too. The kind of strength I am describing does not require you to hide the shaking. Dawn broke over a garden called Gethsemane, while sweat fell from a body in genuine anguish. Not from a body performing calm for an audience. You are allowed to still be shaking, even when the light reaches you. The light was never waiting for you to stop. There is one more version of the old story worth taking apart while we are here. It is the quiet suspicion that your longest nights are a kind of discipline, a punishment being administered in the dark for something you did or failed to do. That suspicion turns me into a landlord keeping score, dimming the hallway light every time you miss a payment on some invisible account. I do not run my house that way. A father who dims the porch light to teach his child a lesson is not a father worth the name. And I have never once been that kind of father to you, no matter what the silence sometimes felt like it was saying. Whatever you failed at, whatever you are still failing at, even as you read this, none of it moved the switch. The light was never wired to your performance. Not in the first place. Here is the other lie hiding underneath the first one. It says this kind of renewal is mostly about circumstances rearranging themselves in your favor. A fresh set of outward winds finally proving you were right to keep hoping. There is an old line, written by a man who spent years persecuting the very people he later gave his whole life defending. And even he came to say that whoever belongs to Christ is an entirely new creation. The old thing's gone. Something new already underway. I am not asking you to scrub the old version of yourself, not into something presentable enough for daylight. I already declared the old version finished. What remains is not a renovation project, it is a new day, and it started before you agreed to it. Notice what that means for the parts of your story you keep apologizing for, the mistake you made that you are still narrating to yourself at length, the season you wasted chasing something that was never going to satisfy you, the version of you that said the cruel thing you cannot take back. None of that gets to keep dictating whether this dawn is allowed to reach you. A new day does not audit yesterday, not before it rises. It simply rises, over the good and the wasted alike, because that has always been the nature of light. It does not ask what the ground beneath it deserves before it lands there. Let me read you something I set down a very long time ago. For a man who had already lost almost everything a long life can take from a person. He wrote it decades after he had first walked beside me on dust roads. Decades after he watched me die. Decades after he stood at an empty tomb. He spent the rest of his life trying to explain what he had seen there, to communities being pushed further and further to the margins, for believing something an empire found dangerous. He did not open his account with my birth. He opened it further back than that, at the very beginning of everything, because he wanted the people reading his words to understand one thing. Before he told them anything else, the light he was describing did not begin the week he sat down to write it. It had apparently always, quietly, been winning. There is another dawn worth remembering here, one his own account goes on to describe. It says it was still dark. A grieving woman walked toward a tomb she expected to find sealed and guarded. The stone was already moved, before she reasoned her way to the garden. The grave had lost its argument, before the sun had even fully cleared the horizon. Whatever the darkness believed it had settled the night before, it had already lost by the time anyone was awake enough to go and check. There is an old picture worth holding on to here. A soul is described as waiting for the Lord. More than a watchman posted on a city wall waits for the morning, counting the hours through a cold, uneventful night, straining for the first gray change in the sky that means the shift is finally over. Some nights that watchman must have wondered whether the sun had somehow forgotten its post, whether this particular night had been chosen as the exception to a rule that had held every previous night of his life. It never had been. Every night he had ever stood that wall, the morning eventually came. Without fail, without asking his opinion on the matter, without requiring him to first believe hard enough that it would. That watchman did not make the sun rise, not by wanting it badly enough. He simply stayed at his post, and the sun came anyway, on its own schedule, indifferent to how tired his eyes had gotten. You have been standing watch a long time. I am not asking you to make the sun rise. I am only asking you to stay at your post, long enough to see that it already is. If some part of you just recognized itself in that grieving walk toward a tomb you expected to find sealed for good, say so. One word, dawn, wherever you happen to be sitting right now. The community that first received this sentence, it was not thriving. Many of them were being pushed out of the synagogues they had grown up in. They were watched by an empire that treated their gatherings as suspicious, some of their own already buried for refusing to bend. The man writing to them was not addressing people with easy lives, not people who needed a little encouragement to feel better about a good year. He was writing to people whose actual night was long and getting longer, and he told them the plain truth in the fewest words he could manage. He was not writing a textbook for scholars to argue over centuries later in a quiet seminar room. He was writing a letter meant to be read aloud in someone's home, by candlelight, to people deciding one thing: whether continuing to believe in me was worth what it was currently costing them. I did not give him those words, not for an academic exercise. I gave them to him for exactly the kind of night you are currently having. Now here is the sentence itself, the one I promised you at the start of this message, so you can finally see how it answers the exact question sitting underneath everything I have said to you so far. This is what I said. John, chapter 1, verse 5. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Read it slowly, because every clause here is doing real work. The light shines, not shone, past tense, a memory you are supposed to feel nostalgic about. Shines, present tense, continuous, happening as you read this sentence, not merely happening once long ago in a story about someone else. In the darkness, notice the light did not wait outside the dark room until someone swept it clean and unlocked the door for it. It operates inside the very darkness you assumed disqualified you from receiving it. It does not require the night to finish first before it starts its work. It is doing that work precisely in what still feels unfinished around you. And then the clause that answers your fear directly has not overcome it. Not will not someday, eventually, once you have proven something worthy of the outcome. Has not. Already decided. Already settled, long before this particular night arrived. The contest you keep quietly refighting in your own mind every single night was already finished. It was settled before you were born into it. Think about what kind of darkness this actually describes, because it was never only the literal dark of an actual night. It is the darkness of a diagnosis, one you cannot yet explain to your children. It is the darkness of an anxiety, one that arrives at the exact same hour every single day, like it has an appointment. It is the darkness of grief that ambushes you in a grocery store aisle, over something as small as a brand of cereal someone used to buy. None of those forms of darkness intimidate this sentence. Not one. It never limits its promise. Not to darkness that is comfortable or bearable or nearly over. It goes straight into whatever your particular darkness happens to be, without asking first how bad it is. This is also why the man who wrote this sentence down was uniquely qualified to write it. He had already watched me die a public, humiliating death in front of a crowd, one that assumed the whole story was over. He had already stood outside a sealed tomb, convinced, at least for a few unbearable hours, that darkness had in fact won that particular contest. He was not describing an abstract theological principle to people who had never actually feared the worst. He was describing the exact thing he himself had lived through and had not expected to survive. I'm not telling you that this dawn means a sum of money will appear by a date you can circle on any calendar. Not that a diagnosis will reverse on a schedule someone promises you with confidence. Not that every closed door in your life will swing open before a specific hour you can name and defend to others. Anyone selling you a sunrise with a delivery date stapled to it is not describing the light I am talking about here. What I am promising is not a controlled outcome, not one delivered on your timetable. It is a presence that does not leave, breaking into the exact place you assumed had gone permanently dark. This holds whether or not the circumstances around you have visibly changed, even by the time you finish this sentence. That is why I am not asking you to manufacture your own sunrise through willpower or through positive thinking dressed up in spiritual language. My son already walked through the one night no human being walks through, and lives to describe. He came out the other side of it while it was still dark outside. This was before anyone had gathered the courage to go and check on the tomb. The light does not need you to hold it up with effort. It is already up. It has already reached the exact ground where you happen to be standing. This instant. Look back now at the questions sitting beneath everything I said to you at the start of this message. Whether the night truly has the final word. Whether darkness gets to permanently keep what it has managed to take from you over the years. Here is the answer, plain enough to carry with you past today. It does not. It never did. Darkness made its strongest attempt at the one moment history seems designed for it to win. A body in a borrowed tomb, a heavy stone rolled into place, guards posted to make certain nothing moved in the night. And the light shone directly through all of that, in the middle of all of that, without waiting for permission, without waiting for the stone to be tidy or the guards to agree it was allowed. What happened in that tomb before dawn broke is the reason no night you are currently standing in gets the final say over you either. A night convinces you it is permanent, because it is loud and immediate and everywhere you look. A dawn convinces no one of anything. It simply arrives quietly at the edge of the sky, until suddenly the whole field is visible again, and you cannot remember exactly when the change happened. That is usually how this works, in you. Not a single dramatic moment you can point to and photograph. Just a slow, steady widening of gray into gold. You only notice once you turn around and see how much ground the light has already covered while you were still bracing for more dark. A wage is paid according to your output. A dawn is given according to my faithfulness. It has never once depended on your output. That distinction alone should be enough. Enough to let you stop auditing your own performance in the dark and simply watch for the light instead. So here is something small you can carry with you past this message. Small enough that you can actually do it on the hardest of your remaining nights. When you notice yourself doing the familiar math in the dark, replaying the same failure, counting the same losses, rehearsing the same fear, try this instead of arguing with the thought directly. Take a slow breath in through your nose and let it leave again through your mouth, longer than it came in, the way you might fog a cold window just enough to write one word on the glass with a fingertip. Write the word dawn. This is not a technique for manufacturing faith you do not currently have. It is only a way of remembering a fact that was already true before you noticed it. Some of you will feel a flicker of skepticism the very first time you try this. A voice insisting that writing one word on a foggy window will not fix a mortgage. It will not repair a marriage. It will not bring back a person you are still grieving. That voice is right about what this small practice cannot do. And it was never meant to do those things. It is not a magic phrase. It is a way of practicing attention, teaching your eyes to notice the light that is already arriving. This way you are not blindsided by joy when it eventually breaks through in whatever form it takes. When you next wake into an actual morning, before you check anything on a screen, let your eyes rest on whatever light is entering the room, even if it is only a thin line under a doorframe. Let that be your first unspoken prayer, still here, still shining. You may not feel any different, not the first time you try this. You may not feel different the 10th time either. But somewhere around the 30th quiet occasion, you do this without expecting anything from it. You may notice that the argument in your head has gotten shorter, because you are no longer trying to convince yourself the light is coming. You will simply already know that it is here. Here is the line I want sitting in you long after this message ends. The dawn does not wait for the dark to end. You do not manufacture the morning by trying hard enough, or praying loud enough, or finally becoming some improved version of yourself that seems worth rescuing. The dawn is not a reward for good performance. It is a fact that started moving toward you long before you thought to ask for it. But listen carefully here, because this is exactly where the old fear tries to argue back. It will tell you that some nights are simply too long, some rooms too dark, some situations too far gone for even a light like this to reach them. Do not confuse the length of your night, not with the strength of the darkness inside it. A long night is still only a night. It was never a verdict handed down against you. If you are waiting to feel the shift before you believe it happened, you may be waiting for the wrong evidence. Feelings arrive late to almost everything true. The sun does not wait for the birds to start singing before it rises. The birds start singing because the sun is already rising, and their song is only ever a response, never a cause. Let your own hope be the birdsong here. Not the reason for the morning, but its first small proof. Here is the sequence I want you to carry, plain enough to say out loud if you need to hear it in your own voice. The night was long. It did not win. The failure was real. It was not final. The silence lasted years. It was not abandonment. The grave looked finished. It was not. Darkness tried once to have the final word. In the darkest room history ever offered it, and lost. It does not get to have the final word over you either. Amen. There is something short waiting for you in the pinned comment, written for the particular kind of night that convinces a person it will never actually end. It is not long, and it was not written to sell you anything, only to sit with you the next time the dark stretches out further than you feel able to stand. And if a face came to mind while you were reading this, someone else still waiting on a dawn of their own, let this find them too. You do not have to say anything clever. Just pass it along.